I speak 10 languages, said the single dad's daughter proudly, and the female millionaire laughed but turned pale. Before the story begins, wherever life has placed you today, this message is for you. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the marble floors of Riverside Manor as 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez carefully arranged her father's cleaning supplies. At this early hour, the massive estate belonged to them, just her and Papa Miguel, the head janitor who had worked here for 6 years since her mother Maria passed away from cancer. "Papa, Mrs. Wellington is having that big party tonight," Emma whispered in perfect Spanish, then switched seamlessly to Portuguese. "Ela vai ter muitos convidados importantes." Miguel smiled at his daughter's gift. Even at 8, Emma spoke more languages than most adults ever would. While he mopped floors and cleaned bathrooms, she absorbed every conversation, every accent, every nuance from the international guests who visited the wealthy Wellington family. "Just stay quiet today, mija," Miguel said softly. Mrs. Wellington doesn't like children around during her events. But Emma had other plans. Hidden in her backpack were carefully copied language books from the Wellingtons' extensive library: French, German, Mandarin, Italian, Japanese, Russian, Arabic, Hindi, each one a secret world she explored during her father's long work hours. At 3 p.m., as Miguel worked in the kitchen, Emma overheard Mrs. Catherine Wellington on the phone, panic evident in her voice. "What do you mean the interpreter canceled? The Japanese investors arrive in 2 hours. This deal is worth $50 million. Catherine Wellington, at 45, had built her real estate empire through calculated risks and careful planning. But today everything was crumbling. Her daughter Madison, 22 and fresh from Princeton, paced anxiously nearby. "Mother, what are we going to do? Father specifically said this partnership with the Tanaka Corporation could make us the wealthiest family in the state." Emma listened from behind the kitchen door, understanding every worried word. She knew about the Wellingtons' financial struggles. Conversations carelessly held in front of invisible staff had taught her that their fortune was mostly facade, built on loans and appearances. When Catherine hung up, her hands shaking, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She stepped into the parlor. "Excuse me, Mrs. Wellington," Emma said in perfect English, her small voice surprisingly steady. "I couldn't help but hear about your problem." Catherine turned, startled. "What are you doing here? Where is your father?" "I can help," Emma continued, then smoothly switched to flawless Japanese. "Watashi wa Tanaka-san to hanasu koto ga dekimasu. Kara no kaisha no koto mo yoku shitemasu." Catherine's face went white. Madison dropped her phone. You speak Japanese?" Catherine stammered. Emma nodded confidently. "I speak 10 languages, actually. Japanese, Mandarin, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, Russian, Arabic, and Hindi. I've been listening to your guests for years." The irony wasn't lost on 8-year-old Emma. Here was Mrs. Wellington, who had always treated her and Papa as invisible fixtures, now staring at her with a mixture of shock and desperate hope. "That's impossible," Madison scoffed. "She's just a janitor's daughter." But Catherine's business instincts were sharper. "Say something else in Japanese. Something complex." Emma straightened her shoulders. "Tanaka Corporation no shacho wa shinjitsu to sonke o taisetsu ni suru hito desu. Moshi anata ga kare o damaso to sureba, kare wa sugu ni wakaru desho." Catherine grabbed Madison's arm. "She just said Mr. Tanaka values honesty and respect, and if we try to deceive him, he'll know immediately." Her voice was barely a whisper. "How could you possibly know that?" "I read the financial reports you leave on your desk," Emma said simply. "And I've heard you talking about needing this deal to avoid bankruptcy." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Mrs. Wellington, who had spent years looking down on Miguel and his daughter, now faced a truth she couldn't deny. This 8-year-old child might be the key to saving her family's empire. But what Emma didn't know was that Mr. Tanaka had a secret of his own, one that would turn this desperate evening into something none of them could have imagined. 2 hours later, Emma stood beside Mrs. Wellington in the mansion's grand foyer, her small frame dwarfed by the crystal chandelier overhead. She had changed from her simple school clothes into one of Madison's old dresses, hastily altered to fit her tiny 8-year-old body. Miguel emerged from the kitchen, stopping dead in his tracks when he saw his daughter. "Emma? ¿Qué estás haciendo?" "Papa, I'm helping Mrs. Wellington with very important business," Emma replied in Spanish, then turned to Catherine. "My father is worried. May I explain to him?" Catherine nodded stiffly. She still couldn't believe she was trusting her family's future to a child whose father cleaned her toilets. But desperate times called for impossible measures. Emma quickly explained to Miguel in rapid Spanish. His face went through a range of emotions: pride, fear, protectiveness, and finally, reluctant amazement. "Mija, this is very dangerous," he whispered. "What if you make a mistake?" "Papa, I won't make a mistake. Trust me." The doorbell chimed. Catherine smoothed her elegant black dress, her hands trembling slightly. "Remember, Emma, you're my young business consultant. Don't mention that your father works here." "I understand," Emma said quietly, but something in her eyes suggested she understood more than Mrs. Wellington realized. Mr. Hiroshi Tanaka entered with 2 associates, all 3 men impeccably dressed in dark suits. At 58, Tanaka commanded respect with his calm demeanor and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. "Wellington-san," he bowed slightly. "Thank you for welcoming us to your beautiful home." Catherine began her rehearsed greeting, but Tanaka's eyes had already found Emma. Something flickered across his face: surprise, curiosity, and something deeper. "And who is this young lady?" he asked in English, though his accent was slight. Emma stepped forward and bowed perfectly. "Hajime mashite, Tanaka-san. Watashi wa Emma Rodriguez to moshimasu. Kyo wa oide itadaki, arigatou gozaimasu." The 3 Japanese men exchanged startled glances. Emma's pronunciation was flawless, her formal grammar impeccable. "Your Japanese is extraordinary," Tanaka said, switching to his native language. "Where did you learn?" "I taught myself by listening and reading," Emma replied in Japanese, her confidence growing. "I find your language beautiful in its precision and respect." Catherine watched nervously, understanding nothing but sensing the shift in the room's energy. Madison stood frozen by the staircase. "Most interesting," Tanaka mused. "And what do you know about our business proposal, Rodriguez-san?" This was the moment Emma had prepared for. Tanaka Corporation seeks to expand its luxury hotel chain into the American market. The Wellington family owns prime real estate in 7 major cities, but they need Japanese investment to develop these properties. "You need local expertise and established connections," Tanaka's associates whispered among themselves in rapid Japanese. They were impressed, but Emma caught something else in their conversation: doubt about the Wellington family's financial stability. "However," Emma continued in Japanese, "I believe you have concerns about the Wellington family's true financial position." The room went silent. Catherine looked pale, though she couldn't understand the words. Tanaka studied Emma carefully. "You are very perceptive for one so young. Tell me, what makes you think we should trust this partnership?" Emma took a deep breath. This was her gamble. "Because, Tanaka-san, sometimes the most valuable assets are the ones others overlook. The Wellington family has something more precious than money. They have prime real estate in locations that will only become more valuable. And I can ensure that this partnership is built on honesty, not deception." "And how could you possibly guarantee such a thing?" Tanaka asked, genuinely curious. Emma glanced at her father, who watched from the doorway with a mixture of pride and terror. Then she looked directly at Tanaka. "Because, sir, I understand what it means to be underestimated." Tanaka smiled for the first time that evening, but his smile held secrets that would soon turn this business meeting into something much more personal and much more dangerous. "Fascinating," Tanaka said, his dark eyes studying Emma with an intensity that made Catherine nervous. "Rodriguez-san, would you join me for a private conversation?" In Japanese, of course. Catherine started to protest, but Tanaka held up a gentle hand. "Business often requires delicate discussions. The child will not be harmed." Miguel stepped forward protectively, but Emma touched his arm. "Está bien, papa. I can handle this." They moved to the Wellingtons' private study, leaving Catherine and Madison in agonized suspense. Emma noticed Tanaka's associates remained in the foyer. This was meant to be truly private. Once alone, Tanaka's demeanor shifted completely. He knelt down to Emma's eye level, his voice soft but urgent in Japanese. "Emma Rodriguez, I must ask you something very important. What is your mother's maiden name?" Emma blinked, surprised. "Tanaka, sir. Maria Tanaka Rodriguez. But she died when I was 2, and Papa said she had no family left in Japan." Tanaka's hands trembled as he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a photograph. It showed a beautiful young woman, with Emma's exact eyes and smile, standing beside a man who looked remarkably like Tanaka himself. "This is my daughter Maria," he whispered. "She disappeared 15 years ago after an argument about her American boyfriend. I spent years searching for her, hiring investigators across 2 continents. I never knew she had married. or that she had died. Emma stared at the photograph, her 8-year-old mind struggling to process the magnitude of this revelation. You're my grandfather? I believe so, child. Your Japanese pronunciation, your natural understanding of our customs, your intelligence, it all makes sense now. Maria was brilliant with languages, too. She spoke 7 fluently by the time she was 12. Tears filled Emma's eyes. Papa never told me about my Japanese family. He said Mama's family was all gone. Perhaps he didn't know. Maria was stubborn. When she left Japan, she cut all ties. I think she wanted to protect Miguel from my disapproval. Tanaka's voice cracked. I was a foolish old man who cared more about tradition than love. Emma wiped her tears. What does this mean for tonight? For the Wellington family? Tanaka stood slowly, his businessman facade returning. It means, my dear granddaughter, that we have a much more complicated situation than anyone realizes. He moved to the window, gazing out at the estate grounds where Miguel was visible, cleaning the pool house even at this late hour. The Wellington family is indeed near bankruptcy. Their debts exceed their assets by $12 million. I came here tonight not to invest but to purchase their properties at foreclosure prices. Emma's breath caught. You were planning to destroy them? It's just business, Emma. But now, he turned back to her. Now I discover that my own granddaughter has been living as a servant in this house, that her father, my daughter's beloved husband, has been reduced to cleaning toilets for people who treat them as invisible. The anger in his voice was quiet but terrifying. What are you going to do? Emma asked, though part of her already suspected. That depends, Tanaka said, his smile returning. But this time it was sharp as a blade. Tell me, granddaughter, how would you like to see Mrs. Wellington's face when she discovers that the janitor's daughter she's been ignoring is actually the heiress to a $3 billion empire? Emma felt a chill run down her spine. She was 8 years old, caught between loyalty to her father, sympathy for the desperate Wellington family, and a grandfather she'd never known existed. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, and Emma realized this storm was just beginning. Emma stared at her grandfather, her young mind racing. But grandfather, if you destroy the Wellington family, what happens to all the people who work here? What happens to Papa's job? Tanaka paused, clearly not expecting this response. Most adults, upon learning they'd inherited billions, wouldn't spare a thought for their former employers. You're concerned about people who treated you as less than human? He asked in Japanese. They didn't know better, Emma replied simply. And Papa always taught me that revenge makes everyone smaller. Before Tanaka could respond, a commotion erupted from the main house. Through the study window they could see police cars pulling up the circular driveway, their red and blue lights painting the mansion in ominous colors. What's happening? Emma whispered. They rushed back to the foyer, where Catherine Wellington stood in handcuffs, her face ashen. Madison was crying hysterically while 2 FBI agents spoke in low tones with Tanaka's associates. Mrs. Wellington is under arrest for embezzlement and fraud, announced Agent Sarah Chen. We've been investigating her real estate company for months. Catherine's eyes found Emma across the room. You, she screamed. This is your fault. You set me up. Agent Chen frowned. Ma'am, this child had nothing to do with our investigation. We've been tracking your illegal activities for over a year. Miguel appeared at Emma's side, having rushed in from outside. Mija, what's happening? Emma quickly explained in Spanish, watching as her father's expression shifted from confusion to shock to protective anger. Senora Wellington stole money? Miguel asked in broken English. $3 million from client escrow accounts. Agent Chen confirmed. She used the money to maintain this lifestyle while her company collapsed. Tanaka stepped forward, his voice carefully neutral. Agent Chen, what happens to the estate and its employees now? The property will be seized and auctioned to pay back the victims, she replied. All staff will be terminated immediately. Emma watched Madison sob over her mother's arrest, watched Miguel's face fall as he realized he'd lost his job and their home, watched the FBI agents catalog the expensive artwork and furniture that would soon be sold. An idea began forming in her 8-year-old mind, an idea that would require courage, cunning, and the kind of risk that adults spend their whole lives avoiding. She tugged on Tanaka's suit jacket. Grandfather, I need to speak with you privately. Again. This time they stepped onto the mansion's back terrace. The storm had arrived, rain beginning to fall in heavy drops. I have a plan, Emma said in Japanese, but you have to promise me something first. What kind of promise? Promise that whatever happens tonight, Papa Miguel will never have to worry about money again. Promise that the other workers here, the gardener Mr. Santos, the cook Mrs. Patterson, They'll all be taken care of. Tanaka studied his granddaughter. And in return, Emma took a deep breath. In return, I'll help you buy this estate, but not to destroy the Wellington family, to save them. We'll make Madison work for everything, learn what real value means, and we'll make sure that from now on no one who works in this house is ever invisible again. That's a very complex plan for an 8-year-old, Tanaka said, impressed despite himself. Grandfather, you spent 15 years searching for your daughter, 15 years regretting that you let pride come before love. Don't you think it's time to try something different? Thunder crashed overhead, and in that moment Hiroshi Tanaka saw his daughter Maria, in Emma's determined face, the same stubborn idealism, the same belief that the world could be better. Very well, he said finally, but I have one condition of my own. What is it? Tanaka smiled, and this time it was warm, full of genuine affection. You're going to let me teach you about business, Emma Rodriguez Tanaka. Real business. Because if you're going to inherit an empire, you need to know how to run it. Emma nodded solemnly, then surprised him by throwing her small arms around his waist. Thank you, grandfather. As they hugged in the rain, neither of them noticed Madison Wellington watching from an upstairs window, her tear-streaked face twisted with something darker than grief. The game was about to become much more dangerous. 3 months after that stormy night, Emma sat in the back of a black Mercedes wearing a crisp school uniform as they pulled up to Riverside Elementary. Her new life as Emma Rodriguez Tanaka, secret heiress to a billion-dollar empire, required careful balance. She still lived with Papa Miguel in their modest apartment, still did her homework at the kitchen table, but now Grandfather Tanaka visited every evening to teach her about business and finance. Remember, Emma, Tanaka said from the driver's seat, at school you're still just Miguel's daughter. Your classmates cannot know about our family connection. Not yet. Emma nodded, understanding the wisdom in this approach. At 8 years old, she was already learning that real power often worked best from the shadows. At school, however, Emma faced a different kind of challenge. Madison Wellington, now 19 and forced to attend community college after her family's disgrace, worked part-time as a teacher's aide to pay for her mother's legal fees. When she saw Emma in the hallway, her eyes burned with resentment. Look what we have here, Madison whispered during lunch break, cornering Emma by the library. The little girl who destroyed my family. I didn't destroy anything, Emma replied quietly. Your mother stole money. That's not my fault. You set us up. You and your grandfather planned everything. Emma studied Madison's face, once perfectly made up and confident, now showing signs of stress and sleepless nights. Madison, my grandfather didn't even know I existed until that night. And if you remember correctly, the FBI said they'd been investigating your mother for over a year. But Madison wasn't listening to logic. My mother is in prison because of you. We lost everything because of you. Do you have any idea what it's like to go from having everything to having nothing? Yes, Emma said simply. Papa and I lived with nothing for 6 years. The difference is we never stole from anyone to get more. Madison's hand shot out and grabbed Emma's arm. You think you're so smart, don't you? Speaking all those languages, impressing everyone with your little tricks. But you're still just a janitor's daughter, and everyone knows it. Let go of me, Emma said, her voice carrying a surprising authority for an 8-year-old. Or what? You'll tell your grandfather? You'll have me arrested too? What Madison didn't realize was that Emma had been learning more than just business from Grandfather Tanaka. She'd also been studying human nature, understanding how desperation could drive people to make dangerous choices. Madison, Emma said carefully, I know you're hurting. I know you're angry, but hurting me won't bring your old life back. Maybe not, Madison hissed, but it might make me feel better. That afternoon, Emma found a note slipped into her backpack. Meet me at the old Wellington estate at 8 p.m. tonight. Come alone, or everyone at school will know exactly who you really are. Emma stared at the note, recognizing the threat. At 8 years old, she valued her privacy and normal childhood, but she also sensed something darker in Madison's desperation. That evening, as Papa Miguel worked late at his new, much better-paying job, courtesy of Grandfather Tanaka's influence, Emma made a decision that would test everything she'd learned about courage, family, and the real cost of wealth. She called her grandfather. I need you to teach me something important, she said in Japanese. I need to learn how to handle someone who wants to hurt me because of who we are. Tanaka's voice sharpened. Emma, what's happened? As Emma explained about Madison's threat, she heard her grandfather's breathing change. The gentle man who taught her origami and shared stories about her mother was disappearing, replaced by the ruthless businessman who'd built an empire. Grandfather, Emma said quickly, I don't want you to destroy her. I want to learn how to handle this myself, like a true Tanaka. There was a long pause, then, very well. But you don't go alone tonight. And Emma? Yes? It's time you learned that being underestimated can be the most powerful weapon of all. At exactly 8 p.m., Emma walked through the rusted gates of the abandoned Wellington estate. The mansion stood dark against the evening sky, its windows boarded up and gardens overgrown. Grandfather Tanaka and Papa Miguel watched from a car hidden among the trees, equipped with night vision cameras and direct communication to Emma through a nearly invisible earpiece. I can hear everything you hear, Tanaka's voice whispered in her ear. If I tell you to run, you run immediately. Emma found Madison sitting on the mansion's front steps, clutching a bottle that clearly wasn't her first of the evening. At 19, Madison looked years older, her face gaunt and her eyes red-rimmed. You actually came, Madison slurred. Little Miss Perfect actually showed up. What do you want, Madison? Emma asked, staying a safe distance away. I want you to understand what you've done to me, to my family. Madison stood unsteadily. Do you know where I live now? A one-bedroom apartment above a pizza shop. Do you know what I eat? Ramen noodles and whatever free samples I can get at the grocery store. Emma felt genuine sympathy. I'm sorry you're struggling, but your mother. My mother made mistakes, Madison shouted. But she was still my mother, and now she's in federal prison for the next 8 years because some bratty little girl decided to play detective. Through her earpiece, Emma heard her grandfather's sharp intake of breath. Papa Miguel's angry whispers in Spanish were also audible. Madison, I never reported your mother to anyone. I was 8 years old. I didn't even know what embezzlement meant. But you knew enough to manipulate the situation. You knew enough to get your grandfather to swoop in and buy our estate for pennies on the dollar. This caught Emma off guard. What are you talking about? Madison pulled out her phone, showing Emma a newspaper article. The headline read, Japanese investor purchases Wellington estate at auction for $8 million, property previously valued at $12 million. Emma's heart sank. Through her earpiece, she heard Grandfather Tanaka curse in Japanese. He didn't tell you, did he? Madison laughed bitterly. Your precious grandfather bought our family home, the place where my great-grandfather lived, where I grew up, where all my memories were made. He bought it like it was just another business transaction. Emma felt a cold realization wash over her. What are you going to do? Madison reached into her jacket and pulled out a small can. Even in the darkness, Emma could smell the gasoline. I'm going to burn it down, Madison said simply. If I can't have my home back, then no one can have it. Especially not the family that destroyed mine. Madison, that's arson. You'll go to prison. So what? My life is already over, but at least this way your grandfather loses his investment. At least this way you learn that actions have consequences. Through her earpiece, Emma heard Tanaka's urgent voice. Emma, get away from her immediately. I'm calling the police. But Emma didn't move. Instead, she studied Madison's face in the moonlight and saw something that all the adults had missed. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about a broken 19-year-old girl who had lost everything she'd ever known and was making one last, desperate attempt to feel powerful again. Madison, Emma said quietly, what if I told you that you don't have to lose everything? What if I told you there was another way? Madison's hand tightened on the gasoline can. What are you talking about? Emma took a step closer, despite her grandfather's frantic warnings in her ear. What if I told you that my grandfather made a mistake? And what if I told you that 8-year-old girls can sometimes fix mistakes that adults make? For the first time that evening, Madison hesitated. What kind of mistake? She asked. Emma smiled, a smile that would have made Grandfather Tanaka proud with its perfect blend of innocence and calculation. The kind that ends with you getting your home back, but only if you put down that gasoline and trust me. The fate of the Wellington estate, and Emma's first real test as a Tanaka, hung in the balance of the next 60 seconds. Madison stared at Emma, the gasoline can trembling in her hands. You're lying. There's no way I can get my home back. Your grandfather owns it now. Emma kept her voice steady, though her heart was racing. Through her earpiece, she could hear Grandfather Tanaka and Papa Miguel arguing in hushed tones. Tanaka wanted to intervene immediately, but Miguel was urging him to trust their daughter. Madison, what if I told you that my grandfather bought the estate not to hurt your family but to preserve it? What if the plan was always to restore it and return it to someone who would truly care for it? That's impossible, Madison scoffed. But Emma noticed she hadn't poured any gasoline yet. My grandfather lost his daughter, my mother, because he was too proud and stubborn to accept her choices. He spent 15 years regretting that pride. Do you really think he would want to cause another family the same pain he experienced? Madison's resolve wavered. But the newspaper said, "The newspaper doesn't know the whole plan," Emma interrupted. "Madison, what if I could prove to you that there's still hope? But you have to put down that can and come with me." "Where?" Emma pointed toward the mansion's main entrance. "Inside. To see what my grandfather has really been doing with your family's home." Against her better judgment, Madison followed Emma to the front door. To her shock, it wasn't locked. Instead, it opened to reveal the mansion's interior completely restored. The marble floors gleamed, the crystal chandelier had been repaired and polished, and fresh flowers adorned every room. "How is this possible?" Madison whispered. Emma smiled. "Grandfather Tanaka has been working for 3 months to restore every detail exactly as it was when your family lived here. He hired the original craftsman, tracked down identical furniture pieces, even located the same wallpaper patterns." They walked through the rooms Madison remembered from her childhood: the library where she'd done homework, the music room where her grandmother had taught her piano, the sunroom where her mother had hosted tea parties. "But why?" Madison's voice broke. "Why would he do this?" "Because," came a voice from behind them, "I understand what it means to lose family." Grandfather Tanaka emerged from the shadows, his expression serious but kind. Papa Miguel stood beside him, still protective but willing to listen. "Madison Wellington," Tanaka continued, "I bought this estate not as an investment but as an act of restoration. My granddaughter taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is return what was lost." Madison sank into a chair. Her grandmother's favorite chair, she realized with a start. "I don't understand." Emma sat beside her. "Madison, what if I told you that you could live here again? Not as the spoiled daughter of a wealthy family, but as someone who earns her place through hard work and genuine contribution." "What do you mean?" Tanaka stepped forward. "Madison, I am prepared to offer you a position managing this estate. You would oversee its restoration, coordinate events, and learn the hotel business from the ground up. The salary would be modest at first, but you would have your home back." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "After everything I've done? After I threatened Emma? After I tried to burn down my own home? Everyone deserves a second chance," Emma said simply. "But you have to earn it. You have to prove that you've learned from your family's mistakes. There is one condition," Tanaka added seriously. "You must testify truthfully at your mother's sentencing hearing, not to harm her further, but to help the court understand that she was desperate, not malicious. Your honest testimony could reduce her sentence significantly." Madison looked around the restored mansion, then at Emma, the 8-year-old girl she had underestimated so completely. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "I was horrible to you." Emma considered this carefully. "Because, Madison, I learned something important from my grandfather. Revenge makes everyone smaller, but giving people the chance to become better, that makes everyone bigger." Madison wiped her tears and looked at the gasoline can she'd dropped by the door. "I almost destroyed everything. Again." "But you didn't," Papa Miguel said in his careful English. "Sometimes almost is enough to teach us who we want to be." As they talked, none of them noticed the figure watching from the mansion's upstairs window. Someone who had been secretly living in the estate for weeks. Someone whose presence would soon reveal the most shocking secret of all. The real story of Maria Tanaka Rodriguez was about to begin. 3 weeks later, Emma was doing homework at the mansion's restored library when she heard something that stopped her cold. Someone humming in Spanish, a lullaby she recognized from the deepest corners of her memory. "Papa," she called out, but Miguel was in the kitchen with Mrs. Patterson, the cook who had returned to work for the Tanaka family. The humming continued from upstairs. Emma climbed the grand staircase, following the familiar melody to the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, a woman sat at the restored vanity, brushing long dark hair that was streaked with premature gray. When she turned, Emma's world tilted on its axis. The woman had Emma's eyes, Emma's smile, and the face from the photograph grandfather Tanaka had shown her months ago. "Mama," Emma whispered. Maria Tanaka Rodriguez, now 35 years old, rose from the vanity chair with tears streaming down her face. "Hello, my beautiful daughter." Emma stood frozen, her 8-year-old mind struggling to process the impossible. But you died. Papa said you died of cancer when I was 2. Maria knelt down to Emma's level. "Papa thought I died. The whole world thought I died. I had to disappear, Emma, to protect you and Miguel from very dangerous people." "What dangerous people?" Before Maria could answer, footsteps thundered up the stairs. Miguel burst into the room and stopped dead when he saw his wife, the woman he had mourned for 6 years. Maria. His voice was barely a whisper. Hello, Miguel, Maria said softly. I've been watching from the shadows for weeks, trying to find the courage to reveal myself. When I heard about Emma's incredible intelligence, about father finding you both, I knew it was time. Miguel's legs gave out, and he sank into a chair. How is this possible? The doctors. The funeral. I buried you, Maria. I grieved for you every single day. The woman you buried was Jane Morrison, a woman who looked remarkably like me. She had terminal cancer and no family. She volunteered to take my identity so I could escape. Emma found her voice. Escape from what? Maria's expression darkened. From my first husband, Emma, the man I was married to before I met your father. The room went silent. Even through her earpiece, Emma could hear Grandfather Tanaka's sharp intake of breath from downstairs, where he'd been listening to everything. I was 19 when I married Dmitry Volkov, Maria continued. He was charming, wealthy, and completely psychotic. He was also the son of a Russian crime boss. Miguel stood up slowly. Maria, you told me you were never married before, because I knew you would never let me stay if you knew the truth. Dmitry doesn't just let people go, Miguel. When I tried to leave him, he threatened to kill anyone I ever loved. So I faked my death, let the world believe I was gone, and tried to build a new life. But why come back now? Emma asked. Maria looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and terror. Because, my brilliant little girl, your grandfather's business dealings have attracted Dmitry's attention. He knows the Tanaka name. He knows about the Wellington estate acquisition, and he's starting to piece things together. As if summoned by her words, Grandfather Tanaka appeared in the doorway, his face pale with shock and understanding. Maria, he said in Japanese, how long have you known that your daughter was helping my family? Since the first newspaper article about the Wellington estate purchase, Maria replied. I've been living in hiding for 6 years, but I've never stopped watching over Emma and Miguel. Tanaka processed this information with the sharp mind that had built his empire. Dmitry Volkov. I know that name. His family has been trying to expand their operations into legitimate businesses. Hotels, real estate, international investments. Father, Emma is in danger, Maria said urgently. Dmitry has been tracking unusual business activities involving young interpreters. When word spread about an 8-year-old girl who speaks 10 languages and helped broker a $50 million deal, it caught his attention. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. How much danger? Maria's voice was barely a whisper. Dmitry doesn't just eliminate threats, Emma. He collects them. Intelligent children, especially those with valuable family connections, are particularly prized in his world. Miguel stepped protectively closer to Emma. We leave tonight, we disappear, we start over somewhere else. It's too late for that, Maria said sadly. He's already here. In America. His people have been watching the estate for days. As if orchestrated by fate, the mansion's security system began beeping urgently. Tanaka checked his phone and his face went ashen. 6 vehicles just entered the property, armed men. Emma looked around at her family. The grandfather she'd just found. The father who'd sacrificed everything for her. And the mother who'd been dead for 6 years. This was supposed to be their moment of reunion, but instead, it had become their moment of greatest peril. There's something else, Maria said quickly. Something I never told you, Father. When I disappeared, I took something from Dmitry. Something he spent 6 years trying to recover. What did you take? Tanaka demanded. Maria reached into her jacket and pulled out a small silver drive. Financial records, bank accounts, client lists. Everything needed to destroy his entire operation. I've been waiting 6 years for the right moment to use it. Emma's mind raced. Mama, if you have evidence against him, why didn't you go to the police? Because half the police in 3 countries are on his payroll, Maria replied. And the other half are too scared to touch him. The beeping grew more urgent. Through the mansion's windows, they could see dark SUVs surrounding the property, men in suits taking positions around the perimeter. Emma, Tanaka said urgently, there's a hidden passage behind the library that leads to the wine cellar. From there, you can reach the old servants' tunnel that connects to the gardener's cottage. I'm not leaving without my family, Emma said firmly. You're not leaving without us, Miguel assured her. We go together or not at all. Maria looked at her daughter with fierce pride. Emma, there's one more thing you need to know. The reason Dmitry wants you specifically isn't just because you're intelligent or connected to wealth. What do you mean? You have a gift that runs in our family, the ability to remember everything you hear, exactly as you heard it. Perfect auditory memory. It's how you learn 10 languages so quickly, And it's also why you would be invaluable to someone who deals in secrets and information. Emma realized the truth with startling clarity. He doesn't want to hurt me. He wants to use me. Forever, Maria confirmed. As his personal translator, his memory bank, his perfect witness to every deal and conversation, you would become his most valuable asset. The mansion's front door exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Heavy footsteps echoed through the restored halls and voices shouted in Russian. Emma looked at her family, each one prepared to die protecting her. But Emma Rodriguez Tanaka had not spent 6 months learning to think like a businesswoman for nothing. I have a plan, she announced, her young voice carrying surprising authority. But everyone has to trust me completely. And Mama, I'm going to need that drive. As armed men's voices grew closer, 8-year-old Emma prepared to make the most dangerous gamble of her life. Emma, absolutely not, Miguel said firmly as his daughter outlined her plan. You are not going down there to face those men alone. Papa, it's the only way, Emma insisted. Dimitri wants me alive and unharmed. That means I have the only guaranteed safety in this room. But more importantly, he's expecting to negotiate with adults. He won't expect an 8-year-old to outmaneuver him. Maria clutched the silver drive. Emma, this man is a killer. He's not going to sit down and have a reasonable conversation with a child. He will if the child has something he wants more than revenge, Emma replied. Through the mansion's restored windows, they could see more men taking positions. Mama, how many years has he been hunting for that drive? 6 years. But Emma, and how much money has he lost because you took it? Tanaka understood immediately. Hundreds of millions. Emma, what are you thinking? Emma's mind was working with the clarity that had impressed her grandfather for months. I'm thinking that sometimes the best weapon against someone who underestimates children is to let them keep underestimating you right up until the moment you destroy them. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. A voice shouted in accented English, Maria Rodriguez, we know you're here, come out and no one gets hurt. Emma looked at her family. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to walk downstairs and surrender myself to Dimitri. I'm going to tell him I have the drive and I want to make a deal. Emma, no. Miguel started forward, but Tanaka caught his arm. Let her finish, the older man said quietly. While I'm talking to him, Mama and Papa will use the secret passage to reach the wine cellar. Grandfather, you'll remain here and call the FBI, but not to rescue me. To intercept something much more valuable. What are you planning? Maria asked. Emma smiled with a confidence that would have terrified her parents if they'd understood its implications. I'm planning to convince Dmitry Volkov to incriminate himself so thoroughly that even his corrupted police contacts won't be able to save him. Before anyone could stop her, Emma walked to the bedroom door. Oh, and Mama, I'm going to need you to teach me some very specific Russian phrases. Right now. 5 minutes later, Emma Rodriguez Tanaka descended the mansion's grand staircase to meet the most dangerous man her family had ever encountered. In her small hand, she clutched the silver drive that had kept her mother in hiding for 6 years. At the bottom of the stairs waited Dmitry Volkov, 52 years old, impeccably dressed and surrounded by 6 armed men. When he saw Emma, his expression shifted from predatory anticipation to genuine surprise. You must be the famous Emma, he said in perfect English, his Russian accent barely detectable. The little girl who speaks 10 languages and makes $50 million deals. I speak 11 languages now, Emma corrected politely. I learned some Russian phrases this week. Dmitry laughed, a sound without warmth. Impressive. And I assume you know why I'm here? Emma nodded. You want the information my mother took from you 6 years ago. She held up the drive. And I want to make a deal. Children don't make deals with men like me, little girl. Smart children do, Emma replied calmly. Then, in carefully practiced Russian, she said, especially children who understand that you need this information more than you need revenge. Dmitry's men exchanged glances. Their boss speaking with an 8-year-old was not what they'd expected. You think you understand my business? Dmitry asked. I understand that without this drive, you can't access approximately $400 million in hidden accounts. I understand that your partners in Moscow are growing impatient with your inability to recover their money, and I understand that you have exactly 18 days before they decide you're more liability than asset. The room went completely silent. Dmitry stared at Emma with a mixture of admiration and calculation. How could you possibly know those details? Emma's smile was pure innocence. Because, Mr. Volkov, when you spend 6 years learning languages by listening to people who think you don't understand them, you learn all sorts of interesting things. What Dmitry didn't know was that Emma was wearing a nearly invisible wire, and every word of their conversation was being transmitted directly to FBI surveillance teams that Grandfather Tanaka had contacted weeks ago as a precaution. More importantly, what Dmitri didn't know was that the drive Emma held contained far more than just his financial records. It contained a complete digital backup of every conversation Maria had recorded during her marriage, including detailed discussions of murders, money laundering, and international criminal operations. "What kind of deal are you proposing?" Dmitri asked. Emma took a deep breath. The next 60 seconds would determine whether her family lived or died. "I'll give you the drive," she said, "but only after you prove to me that you can provide something my family actually needs." "And what might that be?" Emma looked directly into Dmitri's eyes. "A guarantee that my mother, father, and grandfather will never have to fear you again. Ever." Dmitri's laugh was genuinely amused. "And how exactly would I provide such a guarantee to an 8-year-old girl?" Emma's answer would shock everyone in that room, including the FBI agents listening from their surveillance van. "By letting me record you confessing to every crime you've committed in the last 6 years." The mansion fell deadly silent. Dmitri's men shifted nervously, hands moving closer to their weapons. Even the most hardened criminals weren't accustomed to 8-year-old children making demands of their boss. "You want me to confess?" Dmitri asked slowly. "To you?" "Not to me," Emma clarified. "To the world. I want you to record a complete confession, detailing every illegal operation you've run since my mother left you. In exchange, I'll give you the drive and my word that our family will never use any information against you." Dmitri studied Emma with the calculating gaze of a man who had built an empire on reading people. "And why would I possibly agree to such a thing?" Emma's response revealed the full scope of her plan. "Because, Mr. Volkov, you're not just dealing with financial records anymore. While you've been hunting my mother for 6 years, she's been documenting everything. She has recordings of your conversations, photographs of your meetings, and detailed evidence of crimes you've forgotten you committed." She gestured toward the drive. "This doesn't just contain your money, it contains enough evidence to convict you of 37 felonies and put you in prison for the rest of your life." Dmitri's face darkened. "Then why would I confess to even more crimes?" "Because," Emma said calmly, "confession allows for plea bargaining. Evidence discovered through investigation leads to maximum sentences. You choose, admit to your crimes and potentially negotiate a reduced sentence, or have them discovered piece by piece until you face life imprisonment." Through her hidden earpiece, Emma could hear Grandfather Tanaka's admiring whisper, "Brilliant. She's offering him the illusion of control while actually cornering him completely." But Dmitri was no fool. "You're 8 years old. You don't have the authority to make legal deals." "You're right," Emma agreed. "But the FBI agents listening to our conversation do have that authority." Every gun in the room suddenly pointed at Emma, but she remained perfectly calm. "Mr. Volkov, did you really think my grandfather would let me walk into this situation without backup? Every word we've spoken has been transmitted to federal law enforcement. They're not here to rescue me. They're here to arrest you the moment you try to leave this property." Dmitri's eyes blazed with fury. "You little—" "However," Emma continued quickly, "I can offer you something better than arrest. I can offer you a chance to cooperate fully, provide evidence against your associates, and potentially avoid spending your entire life in prison. And what makes you think I won't simply kill you right now?" Emma's answer revealed the depth of her understanding of criminal psychology. "Because killing me accomplishes nothing. The evidence still exists. The FBI still has recordings of our conversation, and your partners in Moscow will still want their $400 million. Money you can only access with my mother's cooperation." She stepped closer to Dmitri, showing no fear despite being surrounded by armed men. "Mr. Volkov, you spent 6 years hunting my mother because you believed she had stolen from you. But the truth is she was never your victim. She was your insurance policy. She documented your crimes to protect herself, and now that documentation can protect you too. How? By proving that many of your activities were conducted under duress from higher-level crime bosses. By showing that you were often following orders rather than giving them. By demonstrating that you're valuable enough as a witness to warrant protective custody rather than a maximum security sentence." Dmitri lowered his weapon. Around the room, his men looked confused. This wasn't how intimidation was supposed to work. "You're asking me to betray my partners." "I'm asking you to save your life," Emma corrected. "Your partners have already decided you're expendable. The moment they recover their money, you become a liability to be eliminated." Through the mansion's windows, red and blue lights became visible. The FBI had arrived in force. "Last chance, Mr. Volkov," Emma said. Work with us to build a case that protects everyone, or spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, first from law enforcement, then from your former associates. Dmitri stared at this extraordinary 8-year-old girl who had just outmaneuvered him more completely than any adult adversary in his criminal career. "If I agree," he said slowly, "what guarantee do I have that you'll honor your agreement?" Emma smiled, and for the first time it carried a hint of her grandfather's business acumen. "Mr. Volkov, my family built their reputation on keeping their word, even when it costs us. And if I refuse?" Emma's expression grew serious. "Then in 5 minutes FBI agents will arrest you for 37 federal crimes. Your associates will hunt you down for losing their money, and my family will disappear somewhere you'll never find us. You'll have gained nothing and lost everything." As sirens wailed outside, Dmitri Volkov faced the most important decision of his criminal career, and the decision was being forced by an 8-year-old girl who had just taught him that true power doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from intelligence, preparation, and the courage to risk everything for the people you love. "Agent Rodriguez," he said finally, using Emma's mother's maiden name, "you have yourself a deal." 6 months later, Emma sat in a federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, wearing her best dress and fighting butterflies in her stomach. Today was the day Dmitri Volkov would be sentenced, and today was the day she would finally testify about everything that had happened that night at the mansion. The month since Dmitri's arrest had been a whirlwind of FBI interviews, family therapy sessions, and the slow process of learning to live together again as a complete family. Maria had been in witness protection for so long that she had to relearn how to be a wife and mother. Miguel struggled with anger and betrayal over his wife's deception, even though he understood her reasons. And grandfather Tanaka had thrown himself into spoiling his granddaughter while teaching her advanced business principles that most adults couldn't grasp. But today, everything would finally be resolved. "Are you ready, mija?" Papa Miguel asked, adjusting his tie. He looked handsome in his new suit, purchased with money from his promotion to head of estate management for Tanaka Properties. "I'm ready, Papa," Emma replied in Spanish, then switched to English for the benefit of the federal prosecutor who was reviewing her testimony notes. "Remember, Emma," Assistant District Attorney Sarah Kim explained, "just tell the truth about what you observed and heard. Mr. Volkov has already pleaded guilty to multiple charges, so this hearing is about determining his sentence." Through the courthouse windows, Emma could see news vans and reporters. The story of the 8-year-old girl who had negotiated with a Russian crime boss had captured national attention, though her family had managed to keep most details private. "Emma," Grandfather Tanaka said quietly in Japanese, "are you certain you want to testify on his behalf?" This was the controversial part of Emma's testimony. Despite everything Dmitri had done, she was going to ask the judge for leniency in his sentencing. "Grandfather, what did you teach me about business negotiations? That the goal is not to destroy your opponent, but to achieve the best outcome for everyone involved." "And what's the best outcome here?" Tanaka smiled proudly. "Dmitri provides testimony that dismantles the entire Volkov crime organization, serves a reduced sentence in protective custody, and your mother and our family are safe forever." As they entered the courtroom, Emma saw Dmitri Volkov for the first time since that night at the mansion. He looked older, thinner, and somehow smaller in his orange prison jumpsuit. When their eyes met, he nodded respectfully, the closest thing to gratitude a man like him could express. The hearing proceeded with technical testimony from FBI agents, financial experts, and federal prosecutors. Emma listened to detailed descriptions of money laundering, international criminal enterprises, and the massive investigation that her mother's evidence had made possible. Then came her turn to speak. "Your Honor," Emma began, her clear voice carrying through the silent courtroom, "my name is Emma Rodriguez Tanaka and I'm 9 years old now." Judge Patricia Morrison leaned forward with interest. In 30 years on the federal bench, she had never heard testimony from someone so young in such a serious case. "Emma, can you tell the court about your interaction with Mr. Volkov?" Emma took a deep breath and began the story that would determine Dmitri's fate. She spoke clearly and precisely, describing the night at the mansion, the negotiations, and the decision that had led to Dmitri's cooperation. "Your Honor," Emma concluded, "Mr. Volkov made terrible choices that hurt many people, including my family. But when I gave him the chance to make better choices, he took it. He could have hurt me that night, but he didn't. He could have refused to cooperate with the FBI, but he didn't. And because of his cooperation, 17 other criminals have been arrested and hundreds of victims have recovered stolen money." Judge Morrison studied Emma carefully. "Are you asking the court to show Mr. Volkov mercy?" I'm asking the court to recognize that people can change, Your Honor. Mr. Volkov spent 6 years making evil choices, but when he had the chance to make one good choice, he made it. I think that should count for something. Emma paused, then continued with wisdom that startled everyone in the courtroom. Your Honor, my grandfather taught me that in business the best deals are ones where everyone gets something they need. Mr. Volkov needed a chance to live. We needed our family to be safe. The FBI needed to stop a criminal organization. If everyone gets what they need, then justice has been served. When Emma finished her testimony, the courtroom remained silent for a long moment. Then Judge Morrison spoke. Mr. Volkov, please stand. Dmitri rose, looking directly at Emma, as the judge prepared to announce his sentence. Mr. Volkov, this court has rarely seen such extraordinary cooperation from a defendant. The evidence you provided has dismantled one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in North America. Hundreds of victims have received justice because of your testimony. She paused, consulting her notes. However, your crimes were serious and numerous. You have caused immeasurable harm through years of criminal activity. Emma held her breath. Taking into consideration your cooperation, the recommendation of the prosecution, and the remarkable testimony of Emma Rodriguez Tanaka, this court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole in 8 years to be served in protective custody. Dmitri closed his eyes in relief. Without Emma's testimony, he would have faced life imprisonment. As court officers prepared to escort him back to prison, Dmitri turned to Emma one final time. Thank you, he said simply. Emma nodded. Use your time well, Mr. Volkov. When you get out, try to make choices my mother would be proud of. As they left the courthouse, Emma walked between her parents while grandfather Tanaka fielded questions from reporters. Madison Wellington, who had testified earlier about her mother's sentencing, Catherine had received 5 years with eligibility for parole in 3, waved to Emma from across the courthouse steps. Emma, Maria said as they reached their car, how do you feel about everything that's happened? Emma considered the question carefully. I feel like I learned something important, Mama. What's that? That being underestimated can be the most powerful advantage of all, but only if you use that power to make things better, not worse. Papa Miguel hugged his daughter. I'm proud of you, Mija, but I'm also glad this is all over. Emma smiled, but she was already thinking about the future. She had learned languages, business, negotiation, and how to handle dangerous people. She was 9 years old with the education of a graduate student and the practical experience of someone much older. Tomorrow she would return to 4th grade at Riverside Elementary, but Emma Rodriguez Tanaka knew that her real education was just beginning. The world was full of problems that needed solving, and she was just getting started. 1 year later, Emma stood at the podium of the Riverside Community Center, looking out at an audience of 200 people who had come to hear her speak at the first annual Youth Leadership in Crisis Conference. At 10 years old, she had become something of a local celebrity, not just for her encounter with Dmitri Volkov, but for what she had accomplished in the months since. Good evening, everyone, Emma began in perfect English, then seamlessly switched to Spanish for the Latino families in attendance, then to Mandarin for the Chinese community members, and finally back to English. Thank you for coming tonight to discuss how young people can make a difference in their communities. In the front row sat her family, Papa Miguel, now the successful manager of 3 Tanaka properties, Mama Maria, who had started a non-profit organization helping families reunite after traumatic separations, and grandfather Tanaka, whose American business operations now employed over 300 people in the Los Angeles area. Also in the front row sat Madison Wellington, now 21 and thriving as the assistant manager of the restored Wellington estate, which had been converted into a luxury hotel and event center. Her mother, Catherine, had been released from federal prison after serving 18 months and was working as a bookkeeper for one of Tanaka's subsidiary companies, a humble job she performed with gratitude and dignity. This past year, Emma continued, I've learned that age doesn't determine your ability to solve problems. What determines your ability to solve problems is your willingness to listen, learn, and care about outcomes for everyone involved, not just yourself. She gestured toward a presentation screen that showed photographs from her various projects over the past year. With my family's support, I've started 3 programs in our community. The first is a language exchange program that pairs elderly immigrants with young students. Our seniors teach their native languages while learning English, and students learn new languages while hearing amazing life stories. The audience applauded as photos showed Emma working with elderly Vietnamese, Korean, and El Salvadoran residents at the local senior center. The second program helps children whose parents work multiple jobs by providing after-school tutoring and homework help. These kids often go home to empty houses and struggle with schoolwork because their parents are too tired to help. Now they have support. Emma clicked to photos of herself working with dozens of children in the community center's converted classrooms. The third program is probably the most important. We call it Second Chances Stories, and it helps formerly incarcerated people reintegrate into society by sharing their experiences with young people who might be making dangerous choices. On the screen appeared a photo of Emma sitting beside a man the audience recognized, Dmitry Volkov, wearing civilian clothes and speaking to a group of teenagers. A murmur went through the crowd. Dmitry had been released after serving only 2 years of his sentence in exchange for providing ongoing cooperation with international law enforcement agencies. He now worked for a federal program that helped identify and dismantle criminal organizations. Mr. Volkov visits our program once a month, Emma explained. He tells young people about the real costs of criminal activity, not just prison time, but the loss of trust, family, and self-respect. His message is simple. Every choice you make either builds the life you want or destroys it. Emma paused, looking out at the diverse audience of families, community leaders, and local officials. The reason I'm telling you about these programs isn't to brag about what I've accomplished. It's to show you what becomes possible when you stop seeing problems as too big or too complicated and start seeing them as opportunities to bring people together. She clicked to a final slide that showed a graph of community improvements over the past year, reduced youth crime, increased high school graduation rates, and improved relationships between different ethnic communities. None of this happened because I'm special, Emma said. It happened because my family taught me that when you lift others up, you create more opportunities for everyone, including yourself. In the audience, Grandfather Tanaka wiped tears from his eyes. His granddaughter had exceeded even his ambitious expectations. Before I finish, Emma continued, I want to share the most important lesson I've learned this year. People often ask me about the night I negotiated with a dangerous criminal, or about speaking 11 languages, or about helping my family build a successful business. They want to know the secret to accomplishing big things at a young age. She smiled, and her expression held wisdom that seemed impossible for someone who had just turned 10. The secret isn't being the smartest person in the room. The secret isn't being fearless or having special talents. The secret is remembering that every person you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about, carrying wisdom you haven't learned yet, and hoping for opportunities to become better than they were yesterday. Emma looked directly at her parents and grandfather. When adults listen to children, amazing things happen. When children respect the experience of adults, amazing things happen. When families stick together through impossible circumstances, amazing things happen. And when communities decide to solve problems together instead of blaming each other, anything becomes possible. As she concluded her speech, the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. But Emma was already thinking about her next project, a proposal she planned to present to the city council next month for a youth entrepreneurship program that would help young people start small businesses with mentorship from successful adults. After the event, as her family walked to their car, Papa Miguel put his arm around his daughter. Emma, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't spoken up that night at the Wellington mansion? If you had just stayed quiet like I told you to? Emma considered this. I think about it sometimes, Papa. But I've learned that staying quiet when you have something important to say is one of the most dangerous things you can do. Why is that? Maria asked. Because, Mama, the world is full of problems that only get solved when someone decides to speak up. And if the people who can help decide to stay silent, then the people who want to cause harm will always be the loudest voices in the room. Grandfather Tanaka smiled at his granddaughter. Emma, what do you want to do when you grow up? Emma thought about this question that adults had been asking her for months. Finally, she had an answer. I want to keep doing exactly what I'm doing now, Grandfather. Listening to people, learning from them, and helping solve problems that matter. The only difference is when I'm an adult, I'll have more resources and experience to make an even bigger difference. As they drove home through the streets of Los Angeles, passing the community center where Emma's programs operated, the hotel that had once been the Wellington Mansion, and the apartment building where Papa Miguel had raised his daughter alone for 6 years, Emma reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. But the most important changes weren't the financial success or the public recognition. The most important changes were the family reunited, the community strengthened, and the knowledge that no problem was too big when people decided to work together with courage, compassion, and hope. Emma Rodriguez Tanaka was 10 years old, spoke 11 languages, had negotiated with international criminals, and had started 3 successful community programs. But her greatest accomplishment was simpler and more profound. She had learned that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or weapons or even intelligence. The most powerful force in the world is people who refuse to give up on each other, and that lesson would guide her for the rest of her extraordinary life.